Okay, and I'll go ahead and share my screen here. All right, guys, so we're going to build another exciting library app because it's me and I love books. So that's what we're going to do. But we're going to do it in React with Rails. We're going to sprinkle in a little bit of router in there for you guys. It's going to be super fun. So just to kind of let you know, before this started today, I actually went through and I already created the Rails app. I created the React side. I generated a model and a controller already and migrated. So let me actually just get over to the code here and we'll just kind of take a look. So I've already put in the gem rails as well, or the pri-rails. Let me move you guys up here too, so I can see a little better. Okay. So let's just take a brief little run through of what we have so far. So let's start in our database. So here's our schema. It's going to be simple. We have a books table. That title and an author as our attributes. This was our migration file, which I've already migrated as well. I've already created the database also. Let's see. So here's our config. I've not set up the routes yet, so we'll actually go do that here. Actually, while we're in here, might as well just do it, right? So who can tell me what I didn't use our API flag. So I guess before we get that far, can anybody tell me what the API flag does when you create your Rails app and you do the -- API at the end in your terminal? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? So here, I'll show you. Let's go back to the terminal here real quick. So if we go back to where I created this, here we go. So this right here, let me blow that up a little bit. Come on. Get that out of the way. Here we go. So this -- API, can anybody tell me what that's doing? So I know you all did it today. Do you guys know why you did that? Any guesses?
Generate any views?
Say again, Dre?
So it doesn't generate views?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So that stops it from generating views. It also tells our backend that we are going to be using an API call in order to access our database. So very good. So I did use the -- API flag, so we do have that in here. So let's get back to the code. Okay, so here we are in our routes. So can anybody tell me what our routes are going to look like? So remember, it's a book model, books controller. So normally, before, it would just look like this, right? Resources, and then books. And then do, well, actually we don't need to do because we only have the one model, right? Okay, so the way that our app is currently set up, this is actually not enough. So what we need to do is we need to tell it that we used the API flag when we built it. So we need to add the namespace API, do resources books. And then since we have that that technically is a loop, so we need to end that. So really this is just giving our routes the / API so that when we're using our API calls, it's knowing what route to go to in our controller. Okay, any questions there? Good deal. All right, so there's our routes. Let's go take a look here at our app and let's go to our model. So here's our book model. It's empty, which it should be. We only have one model, so there's no need for a belongs to or a has many or anything at this point. Okay, so from here, also, I guess before we get to the controller, here is our client side. So here's our React app. I haven't touched anything in here. It's just your standard React app when you generate your React app. Just so you guys know too, I did add our React Router DOM when I set this up, and I did also add Bootstraps because we're going to use some Bootstrap for our styling tonight. So okay, so that's our client. So let's go ahead and hop up here to our controllers. It's going to be under our API, and here's our books controller. Okay, so really this part is not a whole lot different than what we were doing when we were doing Ruby on Rails. So let's go ahead and build this out. Now, normally, the way that we're going to do this tonight isn't the way that you would normally want to go about doing this when you're building your projects. What I'm actually going to do is we're going to fill out the controller completely, and then we're going to go into the React side, into our front end, and we're going to build out the front end to work with our controllers. Now, when you're building your homework from here on out, the best way to do it is to fill out one controller action. So let's say we start here in our index. Once you have that controller action built, then go into your React side, into your client, and get that index method to work. So show all your books on the page. Once you have that working, then move on to the next one. So, and you don't necessarily have to go in order either. If after that you want to go to, add a new book, or whatever your project is, then go to your create. Get your create method filled out in your controller, and then go to your React side and get that working with your form and everything. And the reason why it's better to do it that way is because then when you're getting these errors in your console, or your app isn't working, you're not chasing back through hundreds of lines of code to figure out where the error is. You'll have a very limited space of where that error could be, and it'll be a lot easier to chase down your bugs. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump in. We'll just fill this out all the way, and then we'll hop into the client side after. So let's start in our index. Can you tell me what we put in our index now? It's going to be a little bit different than what we were doing when we were doing Ruby.
So we need the render Json.
Exactly.
And then book style. Booking.
Perfect. Good job, Javier. Okay, so do you guys know what this render JSON is doing? So what it was when we were doing Ruby, it would have looked like this, right? Add books equals book.all, right? So do you guys know what the difference is between that and this?
So is JSON just pulling from whatever data we created?
Kind of. So did James go over what JSON is? JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So really what this is saying is, okay, when we are getting to our front end, we are not going to be writing in Ruby like we are back here. We are going to be using JavaScript, which React is. It's JavaScript. It's just a JavaScript framework, right? Now we were doing this in Ruby because we were using this instance variable in our view pages so that we could access our database, right? But since we don't use view pages with our React code, all we have to do is just tell it that we're going to render JavaScript, and that when we make our API call back to here with our GET request to get all of the books, that we're going to hit our index controller so it knows where to go in our database to grab that. Does that make sense? A little bit, hopefully? Okay. Okay, so easy peasy. So let's go ahead and do our show here. So here, we're going to do render JSON here as well. And then we are going to do @book equals, just like we used to, book.find params, grab that ID. Now we are going to be using this in other places here in our controller, so we might as well go ahead and do our before action, because then we don't have to write that code, more than one time. So we'll go ahead and call it setBook. Oops. And we'll do this on our, that. So we'll do that on our show. What other actions in our controller is going to need setBook?
Update and destroy.
Exactly. And why does it need set book in those actions? Anybody?
Because it needs the ID.
Precisely. Good job, Kyle. Okay, so now, now that we have our set book before action, let's go down here. Let's do our private method. And let's define set book. And this is going to be at book equals, and we'll actually just grab all of that. Just cut and paste it here. And we're good to go. So here, all we need to do is just tell it, okay, when we go to our show page, or what our show method, and when we're in our front end, because we don't have a view page, we have access to this variable there, so that we can grab the ID. Okay, so let's do our create. So our create's going to be a little different, just like we used to in Ruby on Rails. We're going to go ahead and create a variable here. It's going to be book.new. We're going to pass in the book params. And then we're going to do our if-else statement just like we used to. So we're going to do if book.save. Then we're going to render JSON book. Else, we're going to render JSON book.errors status 422. So what this is going to do is if there's an error here in our Rails in our backend trying to get to this, then it's going to display this in our server. It'll say status 422, probably like unprocessable entity or something like that. So if you see that, then you know, okay, so that's something with the controller method. You come back and take a look at your controller method and try to figure out what's wrong. Okay, and don't forget to end your if-else statement. Now, one thing to notice here too is when we were doing Ruby on Rails, we also had a new method in here, right? And what was the purpose of the new method in our Ruby on Rails?
It had to do with the form, and to like generate a form that you could edit.
Yeah, exactly. We generate the form so you could go in and edit it. Exactly. So we don't need that when we're doing React on Rails, because all of our form and all of that action will all be done from the front end. And then we'll just send it back here to our controller actions to be saved in our database. Any questions about that? Okay, good deal. Okay, so let's move on to our update method. So what are we going to do here in our update method? It's going to be really similar to our create method. The only thing is we do not need to create a variable like we did here, because we have access to our @book variable through our before action, right? So really all we have to do is our if-else statement. So we'll just say if @book.update, and we'll have to pass in our book params here as well, which we have not yet created. Then we're going to render JSON @book. And if that doesn't happen, then just like above, and I'm actually just going to copy and paste this down, it's going to be the exact same thing here. Welcome, Max. And let's see, let me just add you to the rule real quick. Okay, so this is all we need in our update methods. We're saying if it updates, then show the book. If it doesn't, show an error. Pretty simple, right? We've all seen this before. It's not really much different from what we were doing before. Okay, so in our destroy, again, we have access to our @book through our before action. So we're just going to say @book.destroy. Don't need anything else because before we would have it redirect to a path like or a book path or something like that, right? But since we don't have any view pages, we don't have to worry about that because all of that will be done through our React code and our clients for the front end. Okay, and last thing we need here is we need to go ahead and define our book params. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to add or update our books. So we're going to do params.require and our book model. And we're going to permit the user to be able to change the title and the author. Those are the only two params we have. And that's pretty much it. So there's our controller. Okay, any questions about the controller before we move forward?
So like it's a little bit more filled out than like what we were doing earlier. And is that just because like you're gonna have a couple more layers to it? So you're gonna do the before action and all that? I guess I'm just wondering why this one looks more like the ones we were doing a few weeks ago. I don't know.
Good question. I actually didn't look at today's lecture recently, so let me go look at that.
He just kept it like really, really simple. So I guess I'm just wondering like when we would want to go back to kind of more of a full controller.
Well, once your applications really start getting bigger, you'll be wanting to fill out your controllers just like you were before.
Okay.
I mean, the app today, where it's your first day of Rails and React, is a pretty small application really overall. But as we get further into it, we start adding router, etc. Then you're going to be building out bigger, fully fleshed out applications that you'll need all of your controller actions for, because you'll be doing full CRUD actions for all of your data.
So like for our homework assignment tonight with like the menus and the items, it might be a good idea to have it look more like this.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't hurt by any means.
Okay.
So yeah, not a problem there at all. Because I mean, really, it's just good practice anyway. Even if you don't use the controller actions, at least you know what it's supposed to look like. So no harm in that at all. So good question. All right, any other questions before we move forward? Okay. So what we're going to do next here is we're actually going to hop into our client side. So I'll go ahead and leave that. Let me just get these. Okay. Those down. Let's hop into our client. First things first, we're going to hop into our package JSON. We're going to need our servers here tonight, so we need to set a proxy for our second server because they both can't run off of localhost 3001. So our proxy, let's see, it's going to be HTTP, oops, and localhost 3001. Don't forget your comma on the end of that, or it's going to break your app. Any questions about the proxy and what that's doing? Okay, good deal. So now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop in to, let's see, let's go to our source, and let's go to our index.js. Okay, pretty standard here. Let's actually get rid of this service worker. We don't need that right now. We're not going to need this index.css. Let me actually go get rid of that here. Actually, just clean this up a little bit just to make it a little bit easier to see that what we're doing. So we don't need really any of these other files because we're not using them. Okay, so we have just our app and our index.js. So here in our index.js, let's go ahead and add our router. So we're going to import browser router. And I like to give it an alias, it's just router because it's easier to type. And we're going to bring that from React router DOM. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap our app in that router. That way we can have access to our own custom routes. You guys remember this from last week, I'm sure, right? Okay, good. I'm glad you guys do. All right. Don't forget to move your comma down. Okay. Any questions about our index.js?
What's the React strict mode?
That is a good question, Javier. It's something that they just added like 2 months ago. And from what I understand, it has something to do with like testing or something. I'm not really too sure, to be quite honest with you, exactly what it does.
So do we need it?
Technically, we could get rid of it. I'm just going to keep it there, just so I don't know if they've done more updates to where it's going to break things if we do remove it. So as far as I know, we don't necessarily have to keep it, but I'm going to just to be sure.
Okay, cool.
So yeah. Cool. Oh yeah, we're gonna use some Bootstrap tonight, so let me go grab that info here real quick. I thought I had it pulled up. Okay. Of course, my internet wants to be slow right now. There we go. Okay, so I already added it, so I just need to add the import. There it is. I'm just going to copy and paste that in. Okay, so that'll give us access to Bootstrap throughout the entire application. And that's all. Oh, I did route and not router in here, so that's not going to work. There we go. Okay, so that's really all we need to do in our index.js. So let's go ahead and hop over to our app.js. So as it is now, we're actually going to use this as our page to set up our routes. So I'm just going to actually delete everything in here, and we'll just re-stub it out here from React. Okay, and then export. Yep. That way our index has access to that. Okay. So from here, let's go ahead and set up a route. Just making sure I have everything. Yes. So in order to do that, we need to import our router, or I'm sorry, our route from React Router DOM. Okay. And let's go and throw in a frag tag, just in case we want to do more than one route. Okay, and this will be exact path. And that's going to come from our component that we haven't made yet. And we'll just call it books. That'll be self-closing. Okay, and then I'm going to wrap our application in a container as well. That'll just make it look a little bit nicer. Okay, so there's our container, and that's going to come from Bootstrap. Okay, and then we'll just wrap this in a, ooh, if I can type, container. Okay, there we go. Okay, so any questions so far? Okay, good deal. All right, so let me actually close that down. So let's go ahead and create our components folder. And then we'll make a new file and we'll call that books.js. Okay, we're going to import React from React. And this will be called books. Just do a little arrow function. We do need a return in here since we're using curly braces. And then let's go and export this as well so we have access to it if we need it. All right, and let's just throw a frag tag in here so our app's not broken. And let's just throw in a header and we'll just say test, just so we can see if our application's working. So let's go back to our terminal and let's start up our servers and just see how we're doing here. So rails-s-p 3001, and then we're going to do our yarn start down here. I'll bring this down. Okay, so it's telling us books is not defined in app.js. So, can anybody tell me what we're missing?
You have to import books.
Exactly. Good job, Dre. So we'll actually do this here. Import books from / components and books. Okay, there we go. Voila. So we know we're up and running. Now we can go in and start working on our front end and getting everything to show up. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves here, let's actually go back to our terminal here. I'm going to shut down this server, get into my Rails console. Ooh, looks like I did not bundle yet, so I'm going to exit and let me go and bundle. Okay, there we go. Not sure why it's giving me IRB and not pry. Pretty sure I added that. Interesting. Well, oh well. We'll worry about that later. We kind of have limited time. So we'll just do we'll just do book.create. We'll just create a book real quick. Title. Everybody want to give me a book title? No? Okay.
Anatomy of Peace.
Say again?
Anatomy of Peace.
Anatomy of Peace. It's a good book, too. And who's the author of that?
The Harbinger Institute.
I think I'm thinking of a different book. Harbinger, like this?
With an A, but yeah.
An A here?
Yeah, just like that.
Okay. Okay. What did I do wrong? Oh, I forgot a comma. Okay, there we go. Let's just do one more. Let's see, title. I'll just do the Bhagavad Gita. And we'll say that was written by Krishna. Because in a way, it kind of was. All right. There we go. So we got a couple books. Don't really need much more than that. So let's go ahead and exit this, just so we that way we have some data to work with. And it's going to bring our server back up. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and get into our books component here. So we'll worry about that later. Okay, so what's the first thing that, so remember, we're going to use hooks here tonight. So what's the very first thing we need here in our component for our hooks? Go ahead.
You have to import your hook.
Very true. We do need to import our hooks. So let's do that. So what hook or hooks do we think we're going to be using?
Use state.
State. Any others?
Use effect.
Definitely going to need that. Okay, that's probably all we're going to need in here. Okay, perfect. So now that we have our hooks imported, what do we need next? Let me ask you this. If this were a class app, what would we do first?
State.
Exactly. Let's define our state. So this will be, we'll set this to a const variable. We'll call our state books, which makes sense. Use our set books. And equals, here's our use state. And we'll just set that to an empty array. And we'll just push the data there from our database. Okay, so that was easy enough. What do we need next? So just to kind of recap what we're trying to do right now is we're just trying to get our books to show on the page. And there's two things that we're going to need in order to make that happen.
You have to use the use effect hook to pull your data from your database.
Exactly. So yeah, so let's go and do that. And I would actually do that first because, I mean, the other, well, actually, I'll get into that in a minute. So let's just go ahead and build our use effect. So let's go ahead and put our callback function here. Okay, so we're going to be doing an Axios call back to our database to grab the information. So since we're going to need Axios, we're going to need to import Axios. Okay, so let's go and do it. So Axios, and this is going to be a GET request. So this is where our HTTP verbs are going to come back into play again. And here, let's go take a look at our routes and see what our routes are going to look like. So let's do it this way, localhost. Here we go. Okay, so here's our HTTP verb. Now, since we're not using Ruby, we actually don't use these paths with React. Instead, we'll use these paths. So here's the path that we're going to use as our GET request to our index to grab all of our books. So just another thing to note here. So it's by these routes that it's getting to our controller. So that's why. So that's how our controller is coming into play. I know when I first started doing this last year, that part was really confusing to me. It was like, how does it know? Like, why am I filling out these controller actions? How does it know which controller action I'm hitting when I'm using React? Because I'm not using these helper methods. Well, it's because we're still using these paths to hit our index control or our controller actions, right? So yeah, so let's go ahead and grab this. And let's just go ahead and paste that right in here. So that's going to be hitting our controller action. Oops. Okay, and then we're going to say, once you have those, go ahead and take the results. And let's set books. So this is taking the place of our this.setState. And let's set our books with that results data. Okay, so that's going to push our data to our use state here. Okay. Now there is one thing missing in our use effect that I'm not sure if you guys are going to be able to pick it out just yet, since you don't have a whole lot of experience in hooks. But can anybody see what I'm missing in my use effect?
Catch?
I'm sorry?
Is it a catch?
I mean, we could do a catch. We don't necessarily have to. And I'm not actually planning on it, so not quite it.
There needs to be an empty array as a second parameter in use effect.
Exactly. And can anybody tell me what that does?
I don't know what use effect does initially, but when you add the second parameter, it treats it like a component did mount instead of something else.
Exactly. So use effect is primarily used, I mean, it has other uses too, but primarily component did mount and component did update are the two lifecycle methods that it's going to be used for. So what this empty array does is, firstly, without that, this is an infinite loop. So we can just call that an infinite loop stopper. Another thing is we can actually pass parameters into this. So let's say we need a book ID for some reason, which later on we might, if we're like doing a review or something like that, it's going to need a book ID. Then we can pass that in here and use that as well if we need to. So just so you guys know, that's available there. I'm not worried about you guys needing to pass anything into it yet, but just know that you can pass data into that and may need to, depending on where you're at in your app and what you're doing. Okay, so there's our use effect. Here's our Axios call. Here, I'm just gonna put a little comment here. So this is similar to component did mount and component did update. Okay. Is there any questions on this use effect and how that works and what we're doing in here? Okay. So now that we have our use effect, in order to get these books to show on our page, what do we need next? Anyone? Any guesses?
We need to iterate through the books state.
Exactly. So we'll do a function. We'll just call it render books. Okay. So let's see. So let's go and return, and let's map through our books. Call each instance of our books a book. Actually, we're going to want parens there. Okay, so here is where we would basically put in our styling. So let's go and import. We'll just use a card just to keep it simple. And we'll bring that in from React Bootstrap. Okay, we'll say card. And let me actually go pull up that info. So I'll just bring it up here. Okay, let's go to our components, cards. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like. So let's use this card.title. So we'll say card title. In here, we're going to put our book title, right? So book.title. Okay, and then after that, we'll do a card.text. This can be, really simple, really small. And we'll call this book.author. I'm going to go ahead and just make our cards a little smaller. Oops, sorry. We're going to do width. And let's just do 18 rand. Okay, so let's go take a look at our browser. Render books is not defined. Well, no kidding. So what do we need to do in order for, what am I missing here with render books? Why is it not defined?
You need to call it.
I do need to call it, yes, but that's actually not why it's giving us the error. So you're right. So let's actually do this. Let's change this. We'll just call this DPL library. Call an HR tag here. And then let's call our function of render books. Okay, so there's our function call, but it's still saying it's not defined.
You have to pass through a parameter. Render
I
books.
don't actually need to pass that through. What I'm actually missing is I never actually defined what this is. It needs to be a const. Okay, so can't resolve. Oh, I think I forgot to add Axios to this. So go ahead and close the servers here. Add Axios real quick. Go. Let's go ahead and restart this here. There we go. All right. Not the best looking app ever, but it's functional, so that's what's important. Okay, so we have our books here. Let's go back to our code. Okay, so any questions about what we've done so far?
I've got a question with the Axios on
Sure.
the use effect. So does the Axios get go to our database to get the information we have in there?
Yeah, exactly. So this Axios.get is saying, so the Axios is actually making the API call through our controller action. So this is calling our index controller action. It's saying, all right, controller, go into our database. And since this is the index, go ahead and grab all of our books so that we can render them onto the page. So what it's doing is it's saying, okay, grab the books, and then we're saying, okay, with those books, which we're calling results, go ahead and set books with your results data, with the data we get from our API call, and it's pushing it up to this empty array in our use state in our hooks.
And you're saying that's getting it from the controller index where we did the JSON.all or something?
Exactly. So this route here, like I said, is coming from this route here, which is our GET request, which is for our index controller here. So it's then going to our backend and hitting this here, and it's saying, okay, go into our database, grab all the books so that we can render those onto the page. But really, well, it's saying grab all those books so we can push it to our state is really what's happening in there. And then we're doing our function to grab our state and loop through it to show it on the page.
Perfect, that makes sense now.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, any other questions before we move forward? Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on then. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and create another file here, and we're just going to call it book.js. And let's go ahead and import React from React. Okay, and we're going to, this is really going to be our styling for our book. So what this is going to do is this is going to make every instance, so let me backtrack here for just a second. We're going to call this component within our render books method so that every time a book is showing on the page, it's going to be its own instance of that book, so that if we're adding other things to it, like buttons, that sort of thing, the button will be just specifically for that book, and it'll be easier to grab the ID for other things. So let's go ahead and import a card from Bootstrap. And this will be const book. Okay. Let's export default book. And since we're using curly braces, we need to put our return in here. And let's go and do a frag tag. Okay, so let's go ahead and call our card. Actually, what we should be able to do, go back to our books here, we can actually just take this right out. We should be able to just paste that right in here. Okay, and then in here, we'll just render our book instead, which means that we do need to import that up top here, or we will not have access to it. So we're going to import book from, actually, it'll just be from book, because we're already in our components folder. Okay. So book is not defined, and that's because we need to pass props, right? So we need to pass our state. So first, I'm going to go and just do this. Let's go ahead and pass it a key so we can just get rid of that warning that I know is there. And that's going to be our book ID. That's for our loop. And then I'm just going to go ahead and spread our state. So I'm just going to spread book here. Okay, and then we'll come up here and pass in our props. And then we'll have to do, instead of book.title, props.title, and props.author. Let's see. So it didn't like something I did there.
Because you had the export default at book.js.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you. Okay, so it's still looking the same. Now here where I passed book through this way, I do want to say, I mean, this is a little bit easier to write, but it does have its downfalls too. So if I were doing other code in here, sometimes it may be easier to just pass that more like a regular prop where you do like book equals books kind of thing. But for our cases here, it doesn't really matter. We'll just spread it this way. Okay, any questions about that there that we just did? No? All right. What time do we have here? 6:30. All right, so we have some time. So how about we go ahead and move on from our index. Let's do a form and get it so we can add a new book. So to do that, what are we going to need?
A form component?
We are going to need a form component, absolutely. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll just call it book form. Okay, there we go. React from React. Const book form. Okay, so since we did curly braces, let's go ahead and put our return in. And then let's export this. Okay, so as always, let's just throw some frag tags in here just so our app's not broken. Okay, so have you guys built a form in hooks before? Or weren't you guys supposed to do one for homework last Friday or something?
Did one today.
Did one today? Okay. Okay, so first things first. Let's see, so we're going to be building a form. We're going to be using Bootstrap. Let's go take a look here. They have their forms here. Okay, so we'll use something similar, to this. So let's go ahead and first things first, let's import form. There we go. From Bootstrap. Okay, there we go. And let's go ahead and just call a form here. So we'll just kind of stub out what the form's going to look like, and then we can get that working. Okay, so there's our form. Let's go and do a form label. Right, okay, good. And we'll call this, so this will be the title. Okay, and then we'll need our form control, which is our input. That's a self-closing. Okay, so let's go take a look at that. Oh, we actually haven't rendered that anywhere, have we? So let's go ahead and we'll just render that here just so we can see what it looks like, even though it doesn't work. And in order for that to work, we need to import our book form. Okay, there we go. Okay, resolve book form. Oh, right. There we go. Okay, so just go ahead and throw in a BR tag here just to give it a little room. Okay, so easy enough. There's our first one. We'll go ahead and actually just copy this down. But we'll call this one author instead. And let's just give us a little room. Okay, there we go. Okay, so let's get this form to work. So what are we going to need in here in order to get this to work?
Do you need like a handle change and handle submit?
We will need one of those, absolutely. So I will actually just comment that out for now because we'll do that in a bit. So, so if we were doing, if we were not using hooks, what kind of a component would our form be?
State.
It would be class, exactly. So we are going to need state in here, right? So let's go ahead and get that going here. So we'll do const. If I can type, there we go. Okay, so what are we going to need in our state?
A book and set book.
Not quite, but I definitely see where your thought process is. So remember, we're actually going to be capturing data here in our form, pushing it to our state, so we can then push it to our books.js and push it to state here, right? So we're only going to be grabbing, so we only have two input fields, so we're going to be grabbing a title and an author, because we're going to be creating a new object with that information. So here, this will actually be title and set title. And actually, we don't want an empty array in there. We're going to have an empty string. And then really similarly, we're going to do author and set author. Here's our use state. Okay, so, and we'll be using these within our handle submit once we have that finished here. So let's go ahead and get our form controls finished here. So let's do a placeholder. Yeah, that's right. And we'll just say book title. Okay, we'll say name is title. So I think we're gonna need that a little later. And that'll actually be lowercase because that's gonna refer to our state. We're gonna say it's required. We're gonna set a value, call it title. And then we will need an on change in here as well. So I'm just gonna, actually we'll go ahead and just stub that out here. Okay, and we'll cover the on change here in just a moment. So let's go and get our other form control set. So it's gonna be really similar. We'll have our placeholder. And say book author. Name is going to be author. Say this is going to be required as well. The value will be author. And we are going to need an on change here as well.
You accidentally deleted value from the top one.
Oh, what do you know? Thanks, man. Okay, there we go. Okay, so first things first, let's go ahead and do our on changes in each one of these. Now, I know in our class apps and everything, we would actually set a separate function for on change that we would have to fill out, and we would just call that here. With hooks, it makes it actually a little bit easier. We can actually just do our on change as a one-liner. So we're going to do a callback function here, and then we're going to say set title with the event, and we're going to target the value. And we do need to pass in the event here. So this line here is going to allow us to type in that input field and actually manipulate our state. This one down here is going to be very similar. So let's pass it an event. And let's say set author. And again, we're going to, the event's going to target the value. Any questions on this on change function? Okay, so let's go. Oh, use state is not defined. We forgot to import our hooks, right? Okay, there we go. There we don't go. There we go. And just because it bugs me, let's give ourselves a little room in there. Okay, there we go. All right, so let me go ahead and bring up our DevTools. So that's just a Bootstrap thing. Okay, so let's see. So here we're in our app, and we're in our book form. Okay, so here's our state. Okay, so we know that on change is working, and we know that on change is working. Okay, perfect. Oh, let's see, we're probably going to want a submit button in there too, huh? So let's go ahead. Do they have that outside the form? No, that's in the form. Okay. And we're going to need to import that here. I like to keep my imports alphabetical. Okay, so that's not going to work yet, but at least it's there. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now we need to be able to push this state back to our books component so we can push it up to our state here, right? So we can add to our array. So we are going to need a handle submit, but before we do a handle submit, we're going to need something here in our books component in order for that to work. Does anybody know what we're going to need in here?
You pass it to add item.
Yeah, pretty much. So we need some sort of function here so we can add a book to our array, right? So, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we're gonna do our const. Let's call it add book. Keep it simple. And we can actually just do this in a one-liner. And we're gonna call our set books. And we're gonna pass it. So we're gonna put the book at the beginning, then spread it, and then we're gonna pass our book object there as well. Now it's not liking something about what I did in here. Oh, here. Because I just did the spread. I didn't add the books. So any questions about this simple little function here? So it's just going to take the data we get from our form. We're just going to call it book because it's just an object. We're going to take that. We're going to say, okay, let's send that to our state through our set books. And let's just put that at the beginning of the array and then spread the rest of our books after that, right? Pretty simple. So now what we need to do in order to have access to that is we need to pass that into our book form. So we'll just call it add book equals add book. Name them both the same, just keep it simple. Okay, so now that we have access to this, so now that we have a function to where we can actually push that data to our state, we need to use that in our handle submit so that when we submit the form, we can push that our form data back to our books component and push it to our state. So we did just pass it a function, so that means that we do need to pass in props here so that we have access to it. And then let's go ahead and get our handle submit. So we are going to need to name that as a const. We'll just stub this out for now. Okay. So what's the first thing that we're going to need in our handle submit?
I would say the prevent default, but I think James was telling us that it'll do it automatically already or something like that.
That would be news to me. From what I understand, we still need the prevent defaults.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and do that just because that's the way I learned it. I'll have to talk with James about that later and see if we don't actually need that. Also notice
I
here.
heard wrong.
Oh, sure. Who knows, man? So no problem though. And notice here I did pass the event through to our function here as well, which is the submit is the event. So after we have our prevent default, we then need to take that information and we need to send that back through our database, right? So we're actually going to do our Axios call right in here. So let's go ahead and import Axios. And we're going to do, so what kind of HTTP request is this? What verb are we going to be using?
Is it a put?
It's actually going to be similar. We're
Oh,
actually going to use
post.
post. Yes, that's right. Okay. And here we're going to pass in, so let's actually go take a look at our routes. So we're creating a book. So we're still using this API books path. So let's go ahead and, oh, I need to put that in quotations. Okay, so after the path, we need to pass in another argument because we need to tell it what we're pushing through to that path, right? So in this case, we're going to be passing through a title and an author. So basically, we're creating a new book object with our title and author. So imagine this is basically like going in your console, doing book.create, and then in parentheses, you're passing in a title with the title and the author and the author. So it's just taking these and passing it through to our database. So once we have those passed through to our database, we're going to use our .then. We're going to get the results. And we're going to use that add book function that we created. And we're going to pass that the res data. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we need to pass our onSubmit to our form. So let's do our onSubmit. And this can be our handle submit function. And then we need, this is just a Bootstrap thing. We have to tell it that it's a submit button. I think unless I do that in, oh yeah, I do that in quotations, not curlies. Okay. All right, so let's go test it out. Let's see if it works. So we'll just do the Dayspring of Youth. It's by the alias of M. Boom, it works. So awesome. All right, guys. So that's it for our book form. There's our add book. We've only got about 10 minutes left, so that's not really a whole lot of time to dive into much else here tonight. We actually got through this a lot quicker than I expected we would. So for the last 10 minutes here, what questions do you guys have about what we did tonight or just anything in general that I might be able to try to answer?
So in lecture we did the, what was it, the puts? I mean the post in the add function. So you can do it in the submit, handle submit as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, you could really do it in either place. I mean, we could do it here as well. Just for my brain, it makes more sense to do it here because I'm telling it, okay, take the information we're getting from our form, send it to our database, and then once it's saved in our database, then go ahead and pass it to our state through our add book function.
Yeah, that does make more sense to me too.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
yeah, no problem. So yeah, so either way will work, obviously. But for me, it's just, I don't know, it just makes more sense this way. What else you guys got for me? You guys are making it way too easy on me. All right. Well, in that case, I will go ahead and stop sharing.